Hello, everybody. I recently sat down with Noisestorm, the solo developer on the new roguelike shooter that just released into early access, Crab Champions. You may also know him from his music, you know, the one that goes like... If you enjoyed my chat with the makers of Risk of Rain 2 from a couple years ago, this one here with Noisestorm should tickle your fancy, especially if you have aspirations of getting into game development, as again, he's created Crab Champions as a completely solo project. 3D modeling, animations, sound effects, music, not to mention the actual programming and overall game design, it's all him, baby. So sit back, relax, toss this video on over to your second monitor, and enjoy.
Games front, because in making this game, I've played basically every roguelike ever, even the new ones, the ones that have no like reviews, and just
I wanted to pick your brain on that. Like, do you have ones that stand out in your memory, or you just like got a list and you just freaking went for it on Steam and just tried a bunch?
Yeah. Well, I love, like, part of this fun of all this was like in my mind critiquing games and like figuring out what I like about them personally and why I think they did really well or why I think they did bad, or making lists. So I basically did that for every game because that's just fun to me in general. Like I know you like kind of doing mini reviews and stuff as well. And it's a fun kind of habit to get into, and it's really good that you're doing that with game development in mind too, because it'll help you a lot just kind of being able to pinpoint why certain games are working for you or not. But yeah, basically I just went to the roguelike section and went back to the very start and just played everything notable and then everything recent. And by the end of it, I realized that, damn, like almost all of them are really similar, especially in the action roguelike genre. And there is only so many times you can get like a plus 20% damage boost and you feel like excited about it, so they really have to do something super interesting to kind of, make you excited. That excitement you always talk about is like, it's so hard to recapture once you've had that loop more than once, right?
Exactly.
From a really good game. And then getting it again, it's like, yeah, cool, but this reminds me of this game. Or, it's just really hard to get that magic. And I think Noita was the only game that managed to really get that out of me, because it was like so ridiculously, you can just go so deep in that game that you and it's so hard that you want to just keep trying to play it. But every other game, like Gunfire, RoboQuest, all these kind of really good games, they never quite got that, the initial excitement out of me, because it's just, I've seen it before and it's much harder to get that second impression, I think. So that's where I think a lot of the lull is for a lot of games, a lot of genres too, right? You've had a really good time with one title, and then it's so hard to get that same, addiction to the other ones that you're kind of hoping for.
It's like once you find the one that truly represents the genre in the best possible way, it's hard to get other ones. Like you can have like Gunfire is a great example, or RoboQuest even. It's like those are great roguelikes. They're so much different from the traditional, like Isaac style, I guess, like Gungeon or Isaac. And it's like those definitely feel different. Obviously, it's a different perspective. That's a given. But it's like compare those to Risk of Rain 2. Yeah, not really. Like there's so much more. That might be I'm a little biased there, but I think you probably agree on that. Like Risk of Rain 2 is the creme de la creme of roguelike shooters.
It's set the standard for everything, and I think like RoboQuest is better in terms of second to second gameplay than Gunfire. Like the actual smoothness and the crunchiness and how polished it is way better. But then the upgrades are kind of boring.
Yep.
And then Gunfire has really not interesting, but a lot more varied and kind of. You can go on a different run every time, and it's much more build based, but it's less kind of smooth and crispy. And just every game does this in a different way. They do something really good, and the other parts they kind of fall down. But I guess they're all inspired by I guess Risk of Rain kind of kickstarted this whole new action roguelike craze, kind of like Vampire Survivors did for the Bullet Hell Heaven ones, and now everyone's copying that. And it's just kind of it's really hard when one game does something really well. Like I think a lot of games do things better now, but without that initial not having played a game like it before factor going into it, it's not as easy to
exactly.
fall in love with it.
The true genre definition wasn't quite there with the other ones. So you mentioned Gunfire, RoboQuest. Are there any other, and Noita as well? Before we get into that,
really,
no, go ahead if you want to talk about Noita a little bit.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, because we could walk it back, because I'm sure people know you by name from, but maybe they didn't listen to like your singles and whatnot on Monster Cat, but definitely Crab Rave. Everyone that knows meme culture like has at least heard of Crab Rave at some point. So what was before you had your eyes on the roguelike version of Crab Champions? As far as I know, it's gone through multiple iterations, or went through multiple iterations. So how did that process come about? When did you get the epiphany like, oh, I can just make this one specific thing rather than trying to make it a mishmash? like a meme style game. Was that
Yeah.
more or less your thought
Yeah.
process on it?
Well, I'd been doing like mini prototypes in Unreal for years before, and like they were all kind of these PvP based um mini kind of games, so like 6v6 on these maps or kind of a battle royale style games, and none of them were like finished. They were just little prototypes with these third person character guys. And then the whole crab rave thing happened as I was doing a pretty polished prototype that I was like I was doing 90% of my time was going into game development and like 10% of music. This is before crab rave. And my girlfriend was like, Jesus, you're spending a lot of time on that and not a lot of time on your career, you know. And I was like, yeah, but it's so addictive, it's so fun. And then so Crab came out, and I was kind of like, damn, like, you know, this could be. I just kind of immediately was like, hey, I have this terrible generic third person humanoid shooter, and I just made this music video that everyone likes in this magical crab world. Why not take all the knowledge and all the kind of game mechanics from the game and make it actually original and unique, and not just be this military style third person shooter that everyone makes? And that just kind of naturally, immediately made sense, because then I could continue. I think Epic gave me a dev grant for Crab Rave right after, and that was like, damn, look, that's basically funding to work to just go for this game idea and not worry about music and generating income, and just kind of go nuts and really try to make a game. And that's when I kind of took it really serious.
Dang. So how did that process come about? Because that's a pretty major milestone, I would imagine. You know, being able to just commit fully to it. So did you have to apply for that, or did you send them a prototype and then they?
Actually, did I even apply? I think I did. Did I apply? I think I must have. Yeah, but I think it was a mix of that and Crabwave was starting to generate decent income. So I was like, okay, the interest is there, the income can kind of sustain me. And then this was like a big like confidence booster, just to be like, all right, people actually like it. I actually have recognition from the engine itself. Let's just do it and fully going. Because I always wanted to do it. I was just kind of scared. Like, I'm not a game developer. I'm just a guy who makes stupid music.
So you said Crab Rave. They gave you the dev grant for Crab Rave, which was the music video, not the game.
Yeah.
So how
so their Mega Grant system, before it was called Mega Grants, I think it was called a different thing. They basically were supporting any creative uses of Unreal. And at that time, you know, Unreal was much more, like, it was basically only games with a few bits of TV and stuff starting to slip in. So I guess my video being as unpolished as it is, it still was kind of a different use of it at the time. So they just very kindly saw it as a potential grant opportunity. So I was super, like, that was like amazing. That was like, holy shit. Because, you know, it's like Ableton Live giving you a grant for using their software. Like, it's so unheard of, but I was so stoked. And like, there was no, you know, there's no strings attached. There's no like, you have to be representing Epic and all. There's just literally, here's money for for using our thing. And
it's basically like, hey, that was cool. Good job. Here you go.
Yeah. And like, I was like, wow, what is this company? How are they just like, this is crazy. So
that's awesome.
From there, I was like, you know, damn, this is fuel to just go all in and go nuts and really trying to make this game happen. And, you know, I remember it was the moment, it was like, I was like, this is, well, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to actually commit to it. Because before I was like, hey, music is my income. It's my livelihood. I can't just go 180 and do a completely different thing I've never done before. You know, you always hear games are like 99% you're going to fail, and don't do it unless you have, you know, full security, especially if you've never made a game before. And you know, there's all those things going around in your head, but this was just like, all right, go for it. And if it doesn't work out, I've tried it. But
and it's important that you were doing it well before that. Like you said, prototype, and even just using the engine. I remember the Breakout music video that also was in Unreal. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you've been doing this as a hobby, or I mean, I guess that was kind of for your career because it was the music video for a song. But whatever, you've been doing it just as a hobby for fun, well before that. So even like, because I'm sure someone was like, "Oh, what do you mean doing it? You had the safety net already. You had the grant." It's like, no, he was doing it well before that point too. So just keep doing.
Yeah.
What
like what I said, like I was really spending way more time on games than I was on music at that point, and like I was clearly slowing down in terms of my interest in making music and speeding up in terms of this, because I worked for a company called Quixel, who actually Epic now own. It was this they make really good 3D scans, basically like photo scans of objects and surfaces and stuff. So I did like a year of work for them while also doing music and while also learning Unreal, and that all kind of gave a lot of experience and made me realize like I really want to be part of this kind of side of things. So just a lot of things happened. Like I think since 2014 I was doing Unreal with music on the side. I think Heist or one of those songs was when I first artworks with it. So I was kind of slowly working it in, and as time went on, it just got more and more shifted towards only that kind of stuff and less from music, because music kind of hit a cap where I was like, all right, I'm making the same kind of song, and I really I'm not being challenged, and it's totally on me for not challenging myself more. But this was just this world of expansion and all these different possibilities suddenly opening up. Like you can make games, you can make music videos, you can make stills, you can do it all yourself on your own computer without, getting anyone else involved. And that really excited me. Like, so.
Yeah, that has to be a huge component. And a quick little tangent. I've always wondered for the Monster Cat, because they always just did the visualizer with like the black background with the stars and the moon with it. And then they transitioned to music videos. So do they give you the option as an artist to make your own video to go with it? And they also had the option of someone in-house that does that? So did you make your own video to put, you said with Heist was the first one. So like the animated background, I'm guessing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So like that was the safe image on the cover. So I don't think I think I did my own little video, but it was a Monster Cat was still the original visualizer. But then as I was more interested in this, yeah, they were like, here, listen, if you want to do your own artwork, that's fine. And yeah, so instead of paying basically their in-house team, I would just give them the files or whatever.
Oh, you have to pay them? That's not part of an agreement or something.
Originally, this is like super. I guess like originally it was all free. It was all kind of done on the house, and then as Monster Cat kind of grew as a company, there started to be these kind of fees for different things like Instagram and
gotcha.
And I was just enjoying doing artwork anyway, so if I could do it myself, I'd like to. So in those cases, they were nice to let me just do my own thing. And then for the music video for like Crab Rave or Breakout, they're basically like, yeah, let's do it. I mean, Crab Rave was like a bonus. I was like, hey, let's do this stupid April 1st thing. It wasn't meant to be like a big release, but as it got closer, we kind of just like, yeah, why not? And yeah, it kind of worked out. I think the spontaneity of it all was just what made it work. Just it wasn't a planned release. It wasn't this built up planned like marketing thing.
One of those silence brand moments, or they're trying to be super relatable.
No. I was just like, here. I mean, I was really trying to make a cool song, and every time it came out, like Crab Rave, just goofy tropical shit. So I was like, all right, like I have worked on this for like a few months. I just want to put it out and move on and make something non-tropical. But I guess that kind of backfired.
Yeah. So walk us through, because for anyone that's not aware, Crab Champions, it's been out for I think a month early. No, it's April 1st, obviously. So closing in on a month, few weeks. But overwhelmingly positive. That's not an easy achievement to get, especially with thousands of reviews. Like you can have, I don't know what the threshold is. I think it's like you have to have at least 1,000 to even get that point. So multiple thousands of reviews. Clearly, people are enjoying the game. And you said it started more or less off of the grant that you received. You could really dig into it full time. But I remember at first it was like racing with the battle royale mode with what was the other one? Was it the roguelike mode? So what along that period, however long it was, what was the turning point, I guess, where you decided to go all into the roguelike?
Yeah, so I think I realized that making a PvP game is actually really hard, and if you want to do it fairly, like you need anti-cheat, you need dedicated servers, you need a lot of stuff, and it's actually way more like people like it was working technically. Yes, you could duel, and you'd have this. It was never actually going to be a battle royale. It was just kind of somehow everyone thought it was. I think it's just at the time there was a lot of battle royale games coming out, and people assumed it was going to be. But it was always going to be like a duel mode, and then a racing mode, and then a kind of survival mode, which is like this mini tournament versus AI. Where this was like my original prototype, where you were in this kind of bracket tournament thing where every level you were with like 10 other AI, and then if you survived, like everyone had like 3 lives, and if you could eliminate them all and then survive to the end, you got moved to the next bracket where there was harder AI, and you would get better weapons and stuff. And that kind of planted the seed of kind of, I didn't really know what a roguelike was at that point. I was just kind of playing with this survival type elimination game. And then as that got more fleshed out, I kind of added some upgrades and realized that putting more damage or making choices between each round was actually really fun, and it made it kind of more interesting than a traditional just move ahead and do the same thing again and again.
Yep.
And then I don't know what introduced me to roguelikes. I think I was just looking around on Steam for just general games, and I kind of somewhere along the line it just clicked that like everyone was kind of getting burnt out of PvP games at that time as well. Like everyone was just super toxic, and there was a lot of cheating and just a lot of negative stuff. Yeah, it must have been around that time, and it was just like, I realized, wow, people actually, I thought, games you play PvE against AI were kind of dead and there was no market for it anymore. But then I realized, like, damn, people just want a game to chill and play. They doesn't really need to be online, and it can be just this fun game that you play with your friends, chill, and then I kind of from there was like, okay, let's see, this fits in perfectly with the game. Let's see if I can build it out. And then just from there, I kept going more towards PvE and roguelike and away from like competitive online strict kind of tournament style, because I'm a solo dev. There's no way I'm going to be able to compete with people who have, millions of dollars with all
Yeah.
these tournaments and fancy skins and, all this stuff. It made me realize that I have to restructure the scope or else the game's just not going to get done.
Gotcha. So it was more of a scope creep issue where it's like I could, or not even that, because it's quality over quantity. I would assume that was one of your like mindsets going in, because it's like you can focus on each one of these things individually, but why not just put it all into one? And that's ultimately what you decided. And I think it's worked out very well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I was like, oh, I'll definitely get 3 modes in. It's easy. Now, it's easy to prototype 3 basic modes, but it's very hard to make each of those actually
Compelling.
fun. So
Yeah.
compelling, yeah. So I said, listen, I'm going to put all my effort in one, which I thought was the most, because racing was cool, but you kind of get bored of racing games very quickly unless you're super into speedrunning. It's kind of like you play through the tracks and then you're kind of finished and you don't really revisit. And then PvP was getting cut. So that left me with the survival mode, which is basically the most promising, the one I was playing the most prototyping, like just trying to get to the end of the tournament and surviving against these increasingly tough guys. And it was definitely the most appeal. So I was like, all right, I'm putting all my focus on this one and just make it as good as possible. And yeah, that's how it got finished up.
Nice. And I know I've kind of already asked you this directly, but I don't think there was a clear answer for specific influence. Anything come to your mind once you started the journey and you figured out, oh, this is a roguelike game, I need to start doing. Was that your mindset, by the way? Was it like, I need to do research, or was it rather, oh, let me go see what the other games are doing, see what works,
Oh
what
no,
doesn't?
I really like the idea of just trying to, with movies, with everything, I'm kind of always seeing what I like about things and what I would do differently. And, it's just fun to me to kind of rate things and score things. And I've always had that, even with music, like what is my song doing worse than other songs and how could I do it better? And yeah, so that was no different with this. I think to make a good thing, you have to be able to research, or else you're just, I mean, listen, if you're really talented and you can pull off this amazing thing without any research, great for you. That's amazing. But I think most people and most products would do the best if they understand the market, they understand what other games are providing and where you could add something different and be different. So yeah, I basically sat down and I realized I started, like, I know roguelikes aren't really what roguelikes are. The game is like a turn-based 2D top down. That's a roguelike.
Yeah.
ASCII based character based game. So it's really like this new arcade style that everyone's calling roguelike. So that's just kind of what I went with as well. And I just researched everything. Like I was like, what are, and most games, I play for like 2 minutes and be like, all right, that's not for me, but I see what they're doing. It's interesting. And there's deck builders, there's all kinds of different games. So I pretty much played every game I could just to kind of get some kind of influence. And I guess the most strong influences I'd say are like Slay the Spire, Blunky, Noita, of course, Risk of Rain, Hades, Gunfire. Even the 2D games like Isaac, of course, is a classic. Just
Mm-hmm.
all of the kind of greats where they all do their own things differently, but at the same time, you can tell they all have elements you could tell are kind of inspired by each other. So it's almost like this evolving genre that each game is pushing it in a different direction, and they're all kind of moving forward. So it's really cool. It's an amazing genre, and it's so interesting that players are now. It seems to be really popular now, like, and devs and players seem to be exploding in these kind of genres, especially because smaller teams can kind of get away with them because there's a lot of reused assets and replay value just by design, right? You're getting into these generated levels and you're playing through and you get slightly different runs each time.
And I think that's
a perfect thing.
That's also a crutch to a lot of developers because they think that, oh, because we have this procedural generation, we have the randomness already built in, that's enough. It's like, no, you still have to make it compelling. I think that's one thing that I think we already talked about this, but where you want to improve right now is you want to add in, the different assets. It seems like a little thing, but making the upgrades actually be visually distinctive and having the enemies be all different. You said last night you wanted to, go 20 islands without seeing any of the same enemies at all. That stuff matters in the long run. Obviously, solo developer, you have different priorities. And I think, honestly, a big reason why Crab Champions is so successful is because, well, number one, because Crab Rave, everyone kind of knew the name. Like, oh, check it out. Is it a little meme game? Oh, no, it's actually a good game. Oh, that's crazy. But also the polish, right? I didn't experience any game-breaking bugs. There were a couple bugs here and there, like maybe enemies get stuck in a wall, once every 10, 20 runs or something like that. But I think that combined with there's clear attention to detail, you clearly want the runs to shape up differently. That's going to be easier to do once you get more and more upgrades in with all that. But there is clearly that attention to detail there where I think a lot of other games nowadays, I don't know about nowadays, but a lot of other roguelikes in general, they're just like, oh, we have procedural level generation, good to go. And I think that's kind of the wrong way to approach it.
Yeah, I did have a time where I spent probably like 3 or 4 months on a on a procedural. Every map was completely procedural, and I was really interested because it's very interesting tech to kind of work on, and you do get completely fresh, and you don't know where you are in this level, and it's really interesting. But the limitations of that quickly show like it's not very engaging, and you're kind of running into these dead ends and these weird.
It's kind of like the open world, like RPGs that are open world nowadays. It's like that's something that steers me away. Where it used to be like, oh, open world, that's crazy, and now it's like, oh, open world, great, dude. But I have to walk 10 miles to go to one outpost, clear it, and then go to the next one. It's like
exactly. It's kind of it's just you want these nice. So I decided to go for these hand designed smaller levels, and that ended up being like way more interesting because then I could make one really long and distinctive level and one kind of tight cramped cave level. And with the procedural, everything was in the middle. It was all this kind of medium sized cluttery level, and it was the more extremes you try to hit, like it's just so much work to try and make that not feel repetitive. So I found that hand designing is like 10 times better in terms of giving the player like even if I only get like 4 or say 10 hand design levels, it beats 100 procedural ones easily because they all feel very distinct. And that was just it was a big deal to try and do.
Absolutely. And I think games are catching on to that too, or developers that are actually trying to, push the bounds, not just copy the flavor of the month. Like Hyperlight Breaker. Have you seen anything about that game?
Yeah, actually, I saw the trailer from your video, and it looks awesome.
Yeah, so I think they're also doing something procedural, but they're also putting that handcrafted touch on top of it. And I think that's how games have to do it going forward. I mean, as we talked about right at the start of the call, you always have the games that set the standard, and then the other games that try and copy it and fall flat for one reason or another, and then you have the games that push it. So I think games that are trying to push this, you have to approach it from that perspective of, because the players are spending so much time seeing the same stuff over and over, you have to make it compelling each time, which also segues nicely into the next point, which is the enemy design and attacking the enemies. I remember, sorry, I don't know why I'm interjecting my own opinion here, but basically my perspective on this is I remember the Halo 3 video documentary where Bungie developing, and they said it has to be fun to be shot at and it has to be fun to shoot them. Right, that's like that's the simplest form because it's a shooter at the end of the day, Crab Champions. So if neither of those things are true, if they're not both true actually, then you've already failed. You have to scrap it again. Like you can have a pretty looking environment, it can be fun to traverse, but if the enemies aren't fun to shoot at and they're not fun to be shot by, that's like problem number one. So what do you?
Yeah, and I think of all the games I played, a very common thing that went kind of wrong for me that I just wanted to stop playing was that they hurled like 50 different mechanics at me in the tutorial, and then we're like, all right, now play. And I was just so overwhelmed by the amount of different things, and the enemies are doing all these complicated things, and I was trying to figure out how to manage my abilities and my inventory, and everything's breaking. And I just realized if I go for a really simple, just easy to shoot, easy to understand what's going on, how you're getting hit. I mean, obviously there's a lot of work to be done in terms of telegraphing in Crab Champions, but I wanted it to be super simple, like shoot bullet, enemy blows up, get money. And it's just super basic. And if you can get that feeling good, and then you're adding a bit of complexity without stuffing like a million mechanics on top of the player, I think that's the key for just like, I'm just trying to make a fun game. I'm not trying to, reinvent the wheel here. I'm not trying to make a super unique, genre defining game. I'm just making something that I would enjoy to play, right? Just jump in, play a game, jump out super fast. And that was the entire kind of design philosophy for everything. So yeah, like that's totally true. Like if it's not fun to shoot and run around, it doesn't matter if you've 100,000 hours of gameplay in there with all these different unique things. If it's not fun to play for 5 minutes, people will probably drop it.
It has to be fun right away. And I was going to ask you this. How much time did you spend? Because I clicked the play button and I'm in a game within obviously PC dependent stuff here, but within 10 seconds, I'm already in the run starting to play. Did you have to optimize stuff? Did you make sure that was a priority, or was that just kind of because there's not that much going on, I guess, right now, quote unquote?
No, that's the big focus. I'm sure you've seen like there's no main menu, just kind of you're ready to go.
Yeah, just plop. I was kind of confused the first time. I was like, am I in a run? And I was like, oh no, there's the billboard with the words on it.
Yeah, so I wanted it to be that. Like oftentimes I play like say so a completely different game, right? I'd be playing some game and I'd finish the session and I'm like, I kind of want to just jump into something real quick before I stop playing games. And then I wanted the game I could just literally click and be right in a run and just play a quick run and not be like. Because sometimes the idea of waiting through a 30-second loading screen and clicking through all these menus and connecting to servers, I just don't want to even open the game, and I'm just like whatever. So yeah, that was a really important thing that you're in the lobby, you just sprint forward like 2 meters, and then you're in a new run, and there's no kind of hey, check out our online store, we've got new deals for you, and just all this stuff.
Hey, make sure you unlock the battle pass. Make sure you pay to look cool, guys. Everyone likes paying to look cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that was definitely huge, and it will be continuing to be a huge focus just to keep the to streamline the process, get them in and run, unlocking stuff really easy, and just no kind of unnecessary roadblocks. That was another reason that other games didn't keep me playing. Is like there's too much like dialogue, especially like if you're
Oh my gosh.
you just have to talk to someone. It's a and it's just like doing these long lore things. I'm like, all right. I don't want to. Some people like lore, and that's totally good. But I think it should always be on a side, optional, rather than gating your progress when you're trying to do stuff. So
and I feel so bad because a lot of these games have like the voice acting is great. Maybe the dialogue itself is pretty good and compelling, but it's like I don't want to spend the time doing. It's not that game. Right, I play very particular games. If I was sitting down to play The Witcher 3, of course I'm going to listen to the dialogue. It's the whole point of the game. But if I'm playing an action RPG, I'm not going to sit there and listen to your characters spout exposition at me. At least let me like click on the character and then go away and do like as I'm killing stuff, like the characters are like, I don't know, walkie-talkieing me. I don't you can lore reasons.
Or just especially when you haven't, you don't even know if you like the game yet, and they're giving you like 5 minutes worth of dialogue.
That's the worst thing when you open a game and it's kind of like it takes itself too seriously sometimes. It's like, oh, here's this awesome epic cutscene in our world and setting the stage. It's like, dude, like I don't care. It's not going to get me like to care too.
The common trick with indie game trailers where they show their logo in slow motion and fades to black, and then there's another logo, and it's like nobody knows. Like, just
they're setting themselves up as some like massive.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, like it should be always an optional thing in my opinion, unless obviously like it's a story game or story heavy, or some people like it and that's totally fine. But for me, I'm really like I designed this to be jump in, have fun for 30 minutes to an hour and jump out.
Like there's no cutscene when you boot up.
Tony gives you a big big exposition.
Yeah, that's definitely an important. I mean, also again, there are times and place for that, but you have to know like you said at the very beginning, you have to know the audience, you have to know what you're building for that audience, and of course, you want a game you can just pick up, play, get right into it, get out. And I don't mean to bring up Risk of Rain 2 again, but it kind of has regressed in that. Not even with the DLC, it was before the DLC, where you used to be able to click the play button, Risk of Rain 2, and it would boot up, no intro cutscene, no nothing, and boom, you were in there in like 20 seconds or something. And now it's like, it takes almost a minute sometimes. I'm like, that's interesting because I remember talking to the guys and they were like, oh yeah, that was a huge component. We just wanted to be able to get in there right away. So I don't know, it's just interesting. So hey, keep that focused. Don't ever let Crab Champions take more than 30 seconds to boot up. Don't forget that, bro.
A new 20-minute cutscene that you need to watch without skipping. Yeah.
So speaking more about the game, obviously there's a roadmap that people can check out. It's literally in the game too, so you can see it. But I mean, we all know in this day and age, like roadmaps, they're cool, but there's been so many examples of pretty much anyone that has a roadmap. Like you're never going to be able to hit every single point on time perfectly as it's written every single time. Like this is it's tough. So do you have I can't recall the roadmap off the top of my head. I probably should have pulled it up before I asked you this, but what is your top priority as a developer aside from bug fixes? I think you're kind of weaving in and out. It's been like 3 weeks since release, so I'm sure you got like the baseline pretty good for bugs, I would assume. So what is your next goal with the game? What's your big focus?
Yeah, so basically, like, just to touch on that, like, I had a release date of August 1st, 2020, I think was the original release date. So it's very, very easy to imagine yourself releasing a game or finishing a certain piece of content before you actually do the work. Like, I have a working main menu and the game opens and I was like, yeah, this game's basically done. But really, like, there's so much hidden work, especially if you're like a novice developer like me who has never made something before, right? So with that regard, like, yes, obviously the roadmap, everything I intend to get to, but I can't be magic and just know that it's going to get done because weird bugs and weird issues come up out of nowhere, and it makes certain seemingly easy tasks suddenly really hard. So, yeah, basically, I've been focusing on mainly bug stuff, a bit of light content addition, but not much, just to get the game in a place where people aren't running into stuff like their saves corrupting or, annoying stuff that would just permanently stop them from having fun. And now this update I'm working on right now is going to come out tomorrow. It's pretty much sorting most of the last large, like very commonly complained about things. And then I'm going to step back and kind of work a bit longer on a more content focused update. So, new enemies, new islands, new, maybe even new weapons and stuff, like just stuff that will actually add substantial value. And I'm going to try and just hit everything on that billboard. But, I learned not to give dates and not to promise anything because it really is impossible to, unless you just hit a date and you just ruin the content and make a really rushed, lazy release. I'd like to try and take my time moving forward because all this time I've been pressured by my failed deadline that I missed by like 2 or 3 years, and it's just I would have liked to put the game out in a more finished state, basically. But I'm glad it still came out, and I'm glad that people played it, and now I've loads to improve on, and there's a lot of direct feedback. But yeah, so basically, yeah, lots of new content coming in the updates, but nothing. I can't really say for sure exactly when or exactly what, but I think that's better because it means I can really make sure it's right instead of just arbitrarily agreeing to like this certain time or date for certain content to be done,
Yeah. And I kind of like your perspective on it, that you're not trying to make some grandiose, life-changing experience. You just want a fun game to pick up and play. And I think it's already, given the current status of the reviews and stuff, I think it's safe to say it's a success in that. So you're just trying to maintain that and just go forward at your own pace and, add new stuff. I always like it when games, developers rather, add stuff to a game and they don't really tell you about it beforehand. It's like, hey guys, yeah, we have a patch coming in a couple weeks or whatever. Be like, hey, get ready. And then it comes out and there's like tons of new stuff. You're like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah. I think Noita, to bring it up again, is probably a brilliant example of that. Like the devs just would out of nowhere just drop these huge updates, and like they would have at least I didn't really follow their socials, but from what I could see, there's out of nowhere these massive update patch notes, and you were excited to jump back in and see what they added. And
exactly.
That's the beauty of early access. Like I know a lot of people see early access as this like tainted thing where all these unfinished games that promise stuff that just got abandoned. But I see it as like if a good dev can use the time to actually make a good game and then improve on it, you get these you get amazing updates which feel like little Christmas presents or something, instead of just getting the whole game all at once. And then like people are like, oh, so there's no more content, or when's the next update? Like it's nice to get these little see, the big companies sometimes drip free content intentionally. And that's like a negative thing when they have it already done and they're just kind of putting it out over a longer period of time.
Like when they literally have the data on the disk that you install on your computer or your Xbox, and then they like, hey, and you can't access that right now. That's DLC down the road. I'm not talking about any particular game, not Destiny. I would never say something like that. Sorry, that was
but like it's totally true. Like when it's planned, I feel it's kind of that's the bad side. But when it's organic and I'm pretty much working up to the date, and then I just drop an update and I have nothing done past that date, and then I'm just starting again and building up a new set of things. And I think when that's done, you're just getting the latest version of the game, and you're always, as a player, you're getting just new bits of content that are meaningful, and you're still enjoying each iteration of the game as its own thing. Because I'm sure you've seen games that you've played back in the very first update, and then by the last update, it's a very different game, but you've enjoyed each version differently in a way. Like there's been a different meta, or there's been a different standard thing that was broken in a good or bad way. But sometimes you can create these kind of fun memories. And by the end of early access, ideally for Crowd Champions, they'll be like totally different, like so much more variety and islands and whatever. But people will still look back. Yeah, it is. It's super exciting. But people are already like, hey, can we get the beta builds re-enabled? I miss this and this from that. And that's funny because it's only been like a few weeks. But it's interesting.
And I'm sure that's exciting for you as the developer too, because now that you have the product out there and you have that baseline, and that okay, it's solid. People agree it's solid. The people that are enjoying it or playing it are enjoying it. I'm sure that's exciting for you now, because now you just iterate upon what you already have. You don't have to, I need to redesign the system. I don't know if this will work properly, blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm sure that's still going to happen in some capacity. But, you can now just add on to what you already have because it's a good foundation. I'm sure that's exciting for you.
Well, I kind of fell into this rut when I was redesigning, because basically when I was promising the game was going to come out, nobody had played it. And I was literally the only person that played it for like 2 years. And in those 2 years, I was like, is this even fun? I'm not having fun anymore because I played it so much. So I kept reworking stuff, and that's an endless loop if you just let yourself stick into it. So that's why I'm really glad that it came out now and I didn't spend another year. I was very close to delaying the game another 6 months right before April 1st, because there's still so much that needs to be improved. And I thought that would really harshly impact like how well it would do and people's perception. But I think it's important just to be like, all right, if you get the core stuff down, people will overlook some of the jank and some of the stuff that isn't quite up to scratch.
I mean, it goes a long way. If you can play a game and it doesn't crash and it doesn't lag, except when there's a million projectiles when it's supposed to lag, it's something people take for granted. But I think now more and more, especially when you have massive companies, AAA studios releasing games in buggy, unfinished states, like it's sad that we're at that point, but it really does make a difference. If your game just works right off the bat the way it's supposed to, that's a huge draw to a lot of people. So I'm sure it's that coupled with, it actually is, I'm not trying to detract. It is a good game. It is a fun experience. But as you said, now it's getting into the adding more stuff on top of that, getting the different patches, the different metas, so to speak, that are coming down the pipeline, I'm sure.
I think I'm really happy with the core. I think it's a fun core base, and I understand that after like a few hours, you've seen it all. So it's time to now give players reasons to come back and have really different runs instead of just the same three. Like right now, even in the volcanic biome, you're still seeing islands copy pasted from the first biome. Right, there's so much to be done. It's still very very early, but I'm really happy that's like I got a tweet today. Someone got every achievement in the game and spent 110 hours getting that. Like that's insane to me because the game is still very early and there's still so much to be done. Like the fact that people are still having fun, putting that much time into it is super super amazing to me. And like, yeah, I'm really grateful that people are willing to look past. I was expecting like so much hate for so many things that were just not done that I just said, listen, I'll put them in and I'll fix them later. And yeah, and that's not in a lazy way. It's just more that there isn't enough time. If I want to put this game out in any reasonable time frame and not burn out, I just have to do it. And I can't keep delaying forever. It's just there's a certain point where you have to just be like, all right, this is it. Everything else will get improved, but for now, this has to just go out. And yeah.
And you didn't, excuse me, you didn't have the luxury of going to. Well, I don't know about the luxury, but as far as I know, you did not take this game anywhere in public. You didn't go to Gamescom or something like that and have a public available beta test or demo or whatnot. You basically, I'm sure it was like you sent it over to some friends or something like that. Or maybe it was just you testing the game the whole time. I'm sure.
Yeah, it was very. I feel like such an imposter developer. Like I didn't know anyone in the industry. I wasn't attending events. I wasn't. There was no press involved. Or yeah, it was strange because I was like, I'm just a guy who made music who's now pretending to make a game basically. And basically until the release day, I was very unsure of anything going well. But yeah, I think I sent it to like maybe one or two friends, but really didn't really. Most of the reactions were like, yeah, because they didn't really play that kind of game, or
yeah.
It was too early, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna wait till it's ready. But it was really hard to know if people were gonna like it at all because 5 years working on one thing, and I was getting bored of it. I was like, this isn't good.
Yeah.
But I think you just have to step back and realize that most people are gonna play a few hours at most, and then just enjoy those few hours, and that's great. And that's all. I'm just happy people can enjoy it, and all the future updates can just extend that a bit. But yeah.
Absolutely. Were there specific systems that you were worried about? Is there specific interactions or any key things inside of the game that really you were dreading putting out there? You're like, oh, this is definitely something. And now you're pleasantly surprised. It's like, oh, no one really cares about that.
I think reading the loot, because as you've and many people have said, like they would like unique loot icons and meshes, right? And just to put that in perspective, each mesh, if I was to do a good job and really try and design it, it would take like about a day of work probably per mesh, maybe 2 or 3 a day if I was really getting them done. So if there's 300 plus things in the game, it's going to take like 100 days maybe, just if I was really working and doing them every single day and doing nothing else but designing these unique meshes. So I was like, okay, there's no possible way I can do it in time, and I really worry that people aren't going to bother or want to read the loot, like plus 50% damage for each 6 shot fired from, it's just very nerdy and slow. And in a game with this where you're kind of really fast and you're flying around shooting, you don't really want to be slowing down and reading stuff. But to my surprise, most people, like there's definitely people who you could tell they just pick a random thing from a chest and just move on without even bothering to read, and that's fine. Like it shouldn't be for everyone, but I was really surprised that a lot of people actually do care about what they're picking up and they're reading everything, and they don't seem to mind that much that it's the same mesh for every weapon mod. And it of course will be a great thing, but it wasn't like a deal breaker, and it wasn't a reason they would stop playing, which is great.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that actually pleasantly surprised me was, yes, most of the things are just like damage increase, speed increase, whatnot, but when you boil any game down, like that's what anything is, right? It can be more elaborate, there can be more layers to it, but the end result is always going to be your guy does more damage, your guy has more speed, your guy has more health, whatever it is. So I was pleasantly surprised that getting the different pickups, it doesn't really just feel like, oh, this one is 10% damage, this one's 20% damage, but like half as much speed of the bullet, whatever. You have to, if you want your build to be like super OP, you want a god run, you actually do have to understand how these things interact with them. Of course, we have like buses, stuff like glue shot and aura shot, I believe is the purple one's name as well. Like you're going to have broken combos like that, but for the most part, you can still get a decent run so long as you actually understand what you're picking up and why. You can't just make a random choice and expect it to work. So actually, I was pleasantly surprised with that.
Yeah, I think another thing just on the reference side, I found myself really wanting to quit games that were like plus 5% damage or something really low that you pretty much didn't notice when you picked it up. So I wanted everything to be 50% or really high amounts so that you actually would see the number change pretty significantly.
And everything's a multiplier too, is that correct?
Well, most of the mods are like multipliers of your base damage, so you can go nuts because then perks will scale that multiply damage even more. And I want it to be like this too good to be true feeling where every run feels like, damn, I'm getting ridiculously lucky, but at the same time, the game manages to scale enough that it makes it fun and challenging. And I do think, yeah, like people are able to now flawless Nightmare multiple times in a streak. Like I think there's a path forward with pretty much every gun. If you know the perks and the loot. But obviously, when you first started playing, it was Nightmare is a lot harder. Like I made it very tough, and it was probably pretty frustrating just because you were
I
still
haven't even played on the lower
stuff,
difficulties. I should probably go check them out because
you will like what is play on easy and just see how slow everything is. It's a big difference, but I designed it to be like you would play a normal for a while, and then once you kind of knew everything and knew roughly most of the common build options, then you pop up to Nightmare. But you got the challenge right away, and you still pulled it off. As frustrating as it might have been.
No, because it is. I mean, some of that has to do with I think the starting guns, or I guess the dual shotguns versus the auto rifle. I think is the other starting gun, the AOE, because you get so many of those little crabs, and if you're not using the grenades, you're not using your melee like perfectly, pretty much, you're gonna have tons of those guys sitting around. I think that's a huge learning curve for Nightmares until you unlock the AOE weapon. Well, I guess if you're starting on normal, you'd have the AOE weapon, so like you could compensate for that. But no, it's an interesting gameplay dynamic having to. Do I want to take stuff that will help me kill out the little guys a little more, or do I just focus on a single target? Because the bosses, the elites and the boss, those are pretty hefty DPS checks, especially on Nightmare, and they do a lot of freaking damage. You make like 2 mistakes, there goes the run.
Yeah,
so it's cool that you have to prioritize. You know, do I want AOE right now? Do I want a little bit of defense? Do I want a little bit of single target? It's nice to have that. That is not just not purely random, but in something like Risk of Rain 2, where it's like, oh, I hope I get this item from the chest. Whereas there seems to be plenty of options right now with the upgrades that you've designed.
Yeah, I've noticed there's 2 kind of categories of roguelikes. There's ones where you're kind of along for the ride and you get whatever you get and you kind of make it work. And there's ones where you're given loads of options and you're kind of always tuning it to a build. And I kind of prefer in general just kind of having that choice because it makes you feel like, you know, you made this run happen and it wasn't luck. And I know there's loads of, you know, exceptions to this and different things, but I really like kind of feeling like you designed a specific build that for your gun that you decided for this run that you needed to do, and that's just something that I had originally just one thing per chest, and it just felt like, oh, okay, I didn't want this, but I'll take it. But with 3, I feel like it's rare that you kind of have 3 things you just don't want at all, and there's always something that can kind of work out for you. And also regarding the DPS checks, I love, especially on Nightmare, I've always in any game, I love when the game really makes you have to come up with some ridiculously OP build, or else you're just not going to make it. And I know it probably feels really unbalanced, especially when you're starting out and you're picking like speed and health, and then you realize, oh, I have no damage. But when you know that and you know how fast it scales up, it's kind of satisfying to overcome the steep curve and just kind of
it's always nice to have those runs where you fail and then you do another run and you're like, it's slightly better, and then you have the next run and it's like 10 times better. Like, whoa, that's how it's supposed to feel.
Peaks and valleys.
Yeah, that's awesome. So unless there's anything else specifically when we talk about Crab Champions, I wanted to hit more on the general process because you're a solo developer. I don't know if we've made this clear enough to anyone listening. It's solo development for this entire project. So did you have a specific, I guess, plan going into development, or did you kind of just, because you said you were really enjoying it, is all you were focusing on, all you wanted to do? So you just had that natural, what am I trying to say? You had that natural push to want to do it. But of course, as time goes on and you develop and you hit roadblock after roadblock, I'm sure like it started demoralizing more or less. So did you have a specific approach? Did you say like, I'm going to wake up at this time and do this for this long, then take a break? Or was it more so, I'll just kind of wing it and see how it goes? Because I'm sure the solo development path, a lot of people out there are interested in doing what you're doing and what other people have done. So do you have any guidance for those people?
Yeah, well, I think especially when you're like looking at other devs to see if they're running into the same problems as you, there's very few like things that could kind of give a window. Like I can't count the amount of nights that I was completely hopeless. Like I tried all day to get this basic thing working and it just didn't work. And I went to bed like shit. I just tried everything and it's just not there. So I just, and then the next morning you just got to get up and just really. I noticed in the morning you just get this urge. If you're anything like me, you kind of just want to fix the problem and you want to get to the end of it. And then when you do overcome it, you get this level up feeling where you're like, yes, I did it. I finally figured it out and it was worth it. It took like 3 days of hard work, but you're just going to run into that over and over and over. And the more you do overcome these things, the less scary it is when you run into another one, because you're like, look, I've done it for all these other things. I can do it again. And there's always a way that you can figure something out. It's just, it can feel super like against you and no one's there to help. And you're reading forums and, they're 8 years old and there's no solutions. And that feeling will just hit you a lot, especially if you're learning like, animation at the same time as coding AI and also doing UI and learning how to code in C++. All of these things just feel super daunting, stacked up together. So if anyone's interested in doing this, I suggest just trying to start small with a basic prototype. Don't even touch code. Just if you're using Unreal, use Blueprints, which are like a scripting language, and just do a really simple basic thing. Like take the third person template, which is like a guy who can run around and make him super jump or make him throw a grenade or just do these small tasks. And as you build on those, you're just going to find your confidence grows. I think just a lot of people, and I did it too, so I'm kind of hypocritical here, but they start off with a project that is way too big for their ability, right? And they'll go for this dream game right off the bat. And I kind of did that, and it worked out luckily, but it took years and it was a very hard journey. And I think if I had have done a few smaller projects and finished them, I would be in much better position, because now on any future games, I have a completely different plan on how I would actually go about it. But it does, you just have to learn, and the main thing is experience is the main thing that will get you there. Like just practicing, failing is great, because you eventually will figure out why you failed and how to improve it. And that's the best teacher in pretty much everything.
Absolutely. And did you have, I've heard that documentation is really helpful. Obviously, you're not going to be able to follow. It's like a roadmap. You're not going to be able to follow everything word for word. But having those ideas already on paper seems to help a lot, especially with a solo project or something that has, potentially big scope, but you keep it in check with did you have any specific stuff you had written down, or you just more or less had an idea in your head and you went with it?
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to design a big document about everything in the game. And I did. And I spent like weeks on it, and I would be adding to it. And I'm like, oh, what a great day of work. I added so much to my document. But in reality, now I would say, screw the document. Just get a simple idea, like a one-line sentence you could describe to someone in a quick elevator or something, and just be like, do that. Make that as a prototype, and just make a prototype that does that and does that well. And screw your achievement system and your progression system and all these intricate details, because in my case, most things that I design on paper were just not fun when I actually did them. And I think you have to actually just jump in and make a game before you can figure out if it's actually worth your time. And it's a big trap, because every like game school and stuff says design it all out in a paper, make a document, make it detailed. And listen, when you're trying to get funding and stuff like that, luckily I didn't have to go for that for this project, but a lot of people do. If you're on a team, you're probably going to have to get funding, and you're probably going to have to present your plan. And in that case, it's important to have funding and have actual people behind it. But in my case, I would say if you're designing a game as a solo developer, just make a fun prototype and go from there. And if it's not fun, move on to a different idea. Don't spend 3 months or 2 weeks or whatever writing out this elaborate plan of what you're going to do, because probably it's not going to be as fun as it actually sounds in your head. Everything sounds fun in your head. Like it's GTA, but it's Battle Royale, but it's, it's you'll run into you'll get a quick reality check if it's possible, if it's even within reach of your skills, and then go from there, rather than designing it all out and realizing, oh, I just spent 3 weeks working on something and it's not actually possible.
I'm sure it's intimidating too, because having the idea in your head and then not knowing if you have the skills and the knowledge to translate it to an actual playable product, game, demo, whatever it may be. I'm sure that's intimidating to a lot of people. So how did you approach something like that? You just is it as simple as just Googling stuff, going on Stack Overflow, asking Chat GPT? Like, what was your go-to process for getting over stuff that you were like, I don't really know how to do that?
Well, luckily Unreal has some really good example games. The one that was around for Unreal 4 was called Shooter Game, which is basically what like PUBG and I think PUBG was, but at least Ark and a lot of other Unreal games actually they originally started from this as a sample game, and they kind of extended it.
Dude, that's because Ark, the shooter game.
It's called Shooter Game.
Yeah,
right, yeah. So that project is really good, because I find it, it's impossible to explain the architecture of a game in a tutorial. Really, it's just too complicated. There's too many different things going on. But if you have the time to break apart an actual working game that has all, like, it's basically like a standard FPS. There's bots, you just shoot. There's a time limit, and when the time limit runs out, a team wins, right? It's really just basic, but that's perfect to start from, because then you can see where's the clock counting down, where's bullets being fired, where are the bots being spawned, etc. And then you eventually, I probably referenced that project for like 4 years. and I just broke it down and learned where the snippets were coming from and tried to kind of understand why they were doing what they're doing. And I think that was by far the most informative thing, because then you can extend it. Like, okay, I'm going to make him shoot rockets instead of, hit scan bullets, or I'm going to make the enemies do different movesets, or, act differently. And as you can build on top of that, you realize, oh, making games isn't as hard as it seems. And that was the moment I was like, damn, you can actually do games, because there's brilliant examples and brilliant engine. Like Unreal is full of good stuff that you can learn from. And without that learning material, I don't think exploring forums or anything like that would have been enough to get me to actually finish a game. I think you have good
that
examples
physical thing in front of you. You can see it working, and then you're like, okay, now I get to dive in and see how it's actually functioning.
Yeah. So I would break that apart. Like I did that probably 5 or 6 times, and then I made my own game where I rewrote by hand every part of shooter game that I felt was relevant to my bare bones prototype. Right, I rewrote it all by hand and stripped out any code that was kind of just extra or not what I wanted, and that gave me a big understanding. And then for Crab Champions, I started again from scratch, and that was like the final time where I wasn't really using shooter game and I was kind of doing it myself. And that was where I was starting to feel confident that I can actually design my own game and not have to rely on examples to follow. But getting there required like a lot of breaking down and understanding of
so the
which
moral
classes work.
It takes a lot of freaking time. It just takes
yes,
time. You cannot take
unless
shortcuts.
You're
you have
a freak in nature and you
reference.
can. Yes, you have to reference. You have to learn. You have to, especially if you're doing multiplayer, because it gets way like everything becomes double more complicated, because you're kind of, yes, it'll work for the host, but then what will the client see, and what will the other client see on the other client's machine? And there's like 3 different realities going on, and you're kind of, everything has to be designed with that in mind. So if you're doing multiplayer, that's an additional layer of kind of complexity rolled on top of everything. So yeah, if I was starting, I would say don't do multiplayer first. Definitely just design a single player game and then add multiplayer elements, because I foolishly was like, no, I want my game to be multiplayer right away, and that just adds, it adds headaches to every situation. And it's great when you learn, but it is a very kind of tricky thing to just understand, because it doesn't seem like it's possible. There's all these realities, and I'm not strong at maths. I did basic maths in high school, and I'm not good at maths still. I can barely add 2 big numbers together. Like, so any kind of complex topic required me to really try and understand it multiple times, whereas other people might pick it up faster. So multiplayer was like another one of those things that really took a while to settle in. But yeah,
that's another misconception, I'm sure, is that you have to be really good at math. You have to be really good at programming to make a game. It's like, did you even have any programming experience? You just used the Unreal Blueprint system, right? And then picked up stuff occasionally.
That was a big one. Yeah, like blueprints are really easy to understand. You're just dragging wires, and once you understand those, you'll have a good understanding of how Unreal like structure stuff. So then I would translate my blueprints into code. So I would just write the code of what my blueprints are doing. And by doing that, I picked up how to, code is really not that bad when you realize that you just have to get the syntax right. You don't really have to go on this, especially with game engines. You don't have to know about all the low level stuff. The engine does most of that for you. You just have to learn how to structure your code in a way that's clean and elegant. And I kind of went overboard in that, because I don't have a single blueprint in the game right now that does logic. It's all kind of data only stuff. So you ideally have to have a balance of these two, so you're kind of not wasting a lot of time writing out.
Elaborate on that for a second. So the blueprint, you're saying the code handles most of the actual computation stuff, like the actual code you've written, and then the blueprints are just like the gateway?
So basically, in the ideal situation, you write like the heavy math stuff in code, and then in Blueprint you would do like light functions. So say like a weapon has a fire function, right? In Blueprint you might override that function and do some light logic after firing or something, right? But for my case, I really wanted to learn how to code, so I did everything in code. And then the blueprints are just like where you set what effect you want to play on the weapon, or where you set what sound. So it's just kind of a data interface rather than actual any code going on. So I did it kind of a weird way just to really learn, but it did help me, because any situation where I was like, I know how to do this in Blueprint, but I don't know how to do it in code, I was forced to just do it in code just so I could understand how it worked. So
and that's going to pay
it was
dividends,
beneficial, but
I'm sure going forward that's going to help you a lot. Being able
well,
to
funnily enough,
just code it.
I probably would go fully Blueprint if I was making any kind of prototype now. Just don't even touch code until you have a really fun, solid design, and then, because it does take, code is a lot more. I prefer it for sure, but it is a lot more time consuming to get it kind of. You have to close the editor, you have to relaunch it every time you change code, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So if you don't have a fun game, you're going to waste a lot of time opening and closing the editor and making code changes and figuring out why your code isn't working. Whereas in Blueprint, you're much less likely to run into these roadblocks. You're just going to kind of make it's just much easier to do stuff without failure, and then you're just iterating on that really quick. So once you do have a cool idea, you feel it's fun, you've sent to friends, they like it, then I would probably start moving those things to code where needed, and just could have a healthy mix. But Crab Champions was not a healthy mix. It was just all code, but learned a lot, so not going to complain.
Yeah,
it definitely was helpful.
And then the music, because you've been doing music for years and years. I'm sure it started well before I first heard your stuff on Monster Cat. You were doing it probably as a hobby before that. So for the music of the game, did you pull from projects you already had that existed, or was it all brand new made for Crab Champions? Because it fits a similar atmosphere. It's interesting. The music kind of, it feels like it would belong on this mythical Crab Champion island. You know, there's some songs that are like straight big bangers, but for the most part, like the sound design, all that. So how meticulous were you with the music, I guess is what I'm asking.
Not at all. So if you remember, I said like I was pretty much burned out, not burned out of music, but I wasn't feeling challenged. I wasn't like trying new plugins, and I wasn't like trying to improve my sound. I was just kind of going through the motions of music. So when I did this, it gave me a reason to just have fun again. I realized I was making music such a job that it was like I wasn't enjoying the process. I was just kind of really forcing myself to sit there for 8 hours and make a fun song, and it just killed the vibe for me and killed the original reason I made music, which was I enjoyed making music. So this kind of allowed me to be less, this has to be this kind of track with this specific rule set and everything. I just made whatever the hell I wanted, and that turned out to be quite fun because I could just bash out a track in one day, and it was good enough for the game. And that ended up being super, like, that was the most fun part. Then I was just doing music for fun as a kind of break rather than sitting down and grinding through production. So I think I'm really happy where it is. I'm going to keep expanding on it for a feature, but I feel it's just been fun to figure out these weird kind of, some of the songs have some strange textures and interesting, like, unconventional. That's another thing with games I tried. A lot of them went with like this orchestral style, very kind of soundtrack sounding soundtrack, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or super like 8-bit, super retro sounding. And both of those things, it's much harder for me to get into if I'm not. Soundtrack is a big deal, right? A game with a soundtrack makes a huge difference. So I wanted to really try and make this feel like it's part of the game and feel unique and cohesive. And it's not going to be the best soundtrack ever, but it definitely has its own kind of style and
has its own
personality, right?
Imprint on the game for sure. And you're exactly right. It's like how many, literally every single trailer of anything nowadays, if it's trying to be epic, it's going to be like orchestral or like have some EDM orchestral like mixture. It's like, okay, we get it, man. All right.
It kind of reminds me of the amount of games I see that are in hell with heavy metal and you're shooting like zombies in a bloody way. Like, it's just, I don't know why. It's like everyone goes for the exact Doom combo for every iteration. And it's like, if you went with a slightly different response, you could totally stumble upon a brand new kind of, feeling and have your own kind of genre. But I feel people do sometimes pigeonhole themselves into these kind of tropes, these expected, you're in hell. You better have heavy metal because that's hellish. And it just kind of, it's too predictable that it's like everything. If you've seen it before, it's not going to be as impactful as if you kind of try something else. Not saying Crab Champions has the most impactful soundtrack. Sure. It's not, but it definitely stands out from, it's a unique sounding soundtrack, right? Most games
it has its own flair. Absolutely. It doesn't sound like you just commissioned it from random big ghost producer here for video game soundtracks, right? Yeah, that's a huge component. The sound design of the game as well as the music of the game. And that's something with Halo. I've been playing Halo since I was a little kid, and the newer Halos, it just doesn't have the same, they made it too realistic. And I see this with a lot of games too. It's like this, they're if it's a shooter, they're going to record gun sounds and then put them in the game. That's pretty much more or less what they're doing. And it's like that fits for some, like Tarkov. Of course, that's going to fit with Tarkov, trying to be a milsim game. But for your futuristic game where I'm shooting a sniper rifle that sounds like a sniper rifle that I can go shoot at the range in real life, like that doesn't pull me into your game. So I think that says a lot for Crab Champions. I would like meteor gun sounds in Crab Champions personally.
Every sound is like my first attempt. Don't worry, it's gonna be, every gun is gonna have a new model, a new sound, nice little foley when you aim in, way beefier. The impact sounds, the hit marker sounds, everything.
Because like, the rest of the sounds fit the game, and I'm sure you have like stock placeholder for like the ants popping or whatever. I'm sure those are all like stock as well. So I'm excited to see what you do with the sound design.
Oh man, I think it's gonna be a very, like, I'm so excited to just get things to the standard that I'd like for them to have been at for the release. But with time and everything, I was like, everything had to be good enough. And now I'm kind of like, all right, let's take them from good enough to actually Nice. And the shotgun is going to really be beefy, and having
Yeah.
having the time to iterate and just get that nice perfect sound is going to be really fun.
I'm sure that'll
and
be
that's what I'm
fun
looking
too,
forward
because
to.
like sound synthesis is a
Yeah,
huge
yeah,
component
yeah.
in the music that I'm sure you've made in the past. So it's going to be fun to translate that into making like some crazy serum patch or whatever for a gun instead of music.
I actually did that for the old prototypes with the humanoids, and obviously I went crazy with everyone. I made them really bassy and kick drummy. But yeah, layering in all these kind of synthy sounds, I think you can actually get a really cool, unique sound without sounding too sci-fi or too like organic, So
Yeah,
that's going to be a lot of
I
fun.
mean, there's something to be said, obviously, of sampling, and it's like what you said about you have to see what other games are doing. You have to do the same thing with sounds, right? You can't like obviously going and recording something outside and then figuring out how do I make this fit my product, my game. Like, is a random bird chirping going to fit Crab Champions? No, but you can like sample the bird and then make it sound. I don't know, like you can do crazy things to it, and then now it could be the ant sound or something like
Yeah,
Cool
there's a lot of creative uses, and I think no one should kind of force themselves to sample everything themselves, and no one should also force themselves to only synthesize stuff. Just be creative, but don't feel like everything has to come from your own back garden or whatever. There's so much, use the resources that are at your disposal. Like everyone in music samples drums and whatever. Like they use sample packs, they use synth presets. Don't be afraid to just use them. And if you're, as a dev, you've so much stuff to create. There's no reason to try and do it all yourself. Because I've learned myself that's just not a efficient way to work. You're just gonna spend so much time on something like no one is gonna care about. Because in reality, right, when I add all this new stuff, most of it will go under unnoticed. Like in say a new AAA game like Call of Duty, right? They have probably like 2K or 4K textures for the gloves on your guys' hands. Have you ever seen the glove? Have you ever like looked at the model? It's so much work, but it does, obviously it adds up to that game feeling very, polished, but you have to remember that certain things have way more impact. And I think I try to do all the most, like the highest impact stuff that you'll immediately see. And then everything else is just missing right now. And I'll just kind of get around to it, but it's not going to add this huge, it eventually will add up, but it's not going to make the biggest difference compared to like a brand new biome or a brand new enemy or something, that's really apparent.
I remember when, here we go again, Risk of Rain 2 launched and the Commandos pistols were just like pew, 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 pew. And then I think it wasn't even the first major content. Maybe it wasn't even the second, but it took like a year or something. And they're like, hey, we updated the sound effects of the Commandos pistols. And they're like, okay, there we go. It's about time. You're right.
They changed it. I didn't even notice.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's like no one really cares. At the end of the day, it's like they prioritizing the correct things is far more important than just trying to hit every single thing. It's much better to focus in on one or a couple things than try and hit everything, and then you're just dividing your time, and then everything's just mediocre, if not just outright bad because of that, right? Quality over quantity.
To put it in perspective, I have like a 50-page Google Doc of current issues, right? And I have to be better at. I'm still learning to be better at it, but you have to prioritize them by effectiveness. Like by fixing this, I could take a half a day to fix this one thing. If it's only going to affect like 5 people, obviously your time's better spent on something that will affect more people. And it can be very hard because it's easy to be like, yeah, this is an easy fix. Like today, right? I was fixing crystals can go minus 1 billion if you go over a certain amount, right?
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's a simple fix. You just cap the integer limit or whatever. And there was just a lot of small other reasons why that took like how many hours? It took like 4 or 5 hours for me to fix, and that's a pretty big issue. So I'm glad it's fixed now. But there's a lot of things like that which I'm spending my time on where I should have been, and this happened during development all the time. And then I might scrap that entire feature a few weeks later, but I had spent so much time fixing all these small bugs around it. So it is very hard to you properly prioritize what you should be working on, because there's just always going to be a huge list of things to do.
Yeah. So are you still kind of in bug fix mode for the time being, and you're just letting the additional ideas and future content kind of just, I know we kind of already talked about this at the start, but I'm just reiterating it. You learn that stuff. You just make the ideas, get a little more concrete in your head, and then just focus on the bug fix stuff. Is that your general plan for right now?
Yeah. I think this update should get most of the most annoying things out, and then people are kind of naturally going to be wanting actual content soon. So I'm going to kind of put my head down and get a big first update out, kind of fully finish all the biomes, get way more enemies, unique enemies per biome, all these kind of things that are actually going to make
the battle pass
$29.99 per month. No. Yeah, all the things that will make the most kind of tangible difference in it. And then after that, I'll start focusing on actual expansions, like new soundtracks, new biomes, and go on from there. So it's really exciting to have this ahead of me, and I'm kind of, the hard part in terms of the solid core is done, and now it's about polishing it up and getting as much new stuff added as possible
And
for as long as possible.
what about skins? Because right now you have the same skin, you can unlock it doing different things. So is your goal to have different skins, like totally unique skins for each and every one of them, or you still want the same system in place where you can get warp skin by doing this and that, or that rather?
Yeah, well, I want definitely unique skin per challenge, but yeah, the ones where you have unique models, like again, that's kind of similar to the unique loot icons thing, where per skin I'd be spending like for a good crab skin that's actually different, where you have different geometry and stuff. That's probably like 4 or 5 days or a week, and that's a long time for one skin when people are waiting on different content. So it's obviously something I'd love to do.
Life out here is rough for solo devs, bro.
Yeah, yeah. Like when you see the reason that the free to play games, they have so much content because they've like so many people working on skins and just working on these kind of things. So they get, when they launch a new season pass, whatever, they have so much content to feed out to everyone. But for me, I'm just here fixing this bug of crystals being -1 billion, and yeah. So obviously skins, as much as I want to add loads of them, it's obviously has to take lower priority for other stuff. But that said, I want way more skins and more interesting ones than just texture swaps. And eventually, I'd like, if you get like a nightmare win with no damage, you get like a crown or some cool little extra stuff that is an addition to your model, not just a color switch.
So what I'm hearing is no short of ideas here, no shortness of ideas. You have tons of stuff down the pipeline. Just takes time. Yeah, just takes time. Yeah. Which that's what you want in early access. That's what people signed up for. This is early access done right. You launch a compelling product off the bat. It actually works. Surprise! Wow, you can play the game and it doesn't crash. And wow. But it also has a lot of. I always kind of roll my eyes when people say, "Oh, this game has so much potential." If you look on Steam reviews, and this could be a very long tangent, I'm trying not to make it, but you go to. I'm sure you experienced this looking at all those roguelikes that you said that you did your research on. Where you look at the reviews and like a mixed game, for example, like mixed is like a death sentence to me. If I see a game with mixed ratings, like, oh gosh, there's something's going terribly wrong with this game right now. But you look at the reviews, it's like, this game is so good, has so much potential. And then they have like 18 different things that they're talking about. And it's like, dude, what does that even mean? It has potential. Everything has potential. You have to talk about how the game is right now.
Right now, yeah. It's unfair to be like, don't hate on this game because will get better.
It's like, what do you mean? You
just got to judge it.
I gave them my money. I can't, I'm just supposed to, you should have paid for the game when it's actually released. No, I'm going to play it now.
But that said, there's that's why I was bracing myself for a really mixed response on this game, because I saw so many mixed games that I tried and I actually thought they were really good, and the reviews were really unfair. Like they were nitpicking very specific things. So obviously I had a list of stuff to avoid in case that would happen to me. Like I really tried to avoid common pain points, like not having keybinds when that someone could play 20 hours and give a negative review because there's no keybind changing, or these quality of life things I wanted to try and add in, because I felt it was unfair if a game is really good, but they're missing just one thing and then they get a negative review just for that specific thing. But people tend to just, if they, or widescreen support or all these kind of, specific builds, specific things. But I get it. Like people want a game to run and they want it to be not crashing. Crashes are a huge one. Like you often see a really fun game that just gets downvoted so much because they have one crash bug that happens every like 30 minutes, right? And that's like a death sentence as well. So I tried my best to try and make it as performant, as stable as possible, while still trying to put out a decent game. But I'm still surprised that people were so nice about it. I really thought that it would be very mixed until I could actually put time to get everything up to scratch. So it's definitely, I'm very, very grateful of that.
That just goes to show, getting in your own head is never a good thing. You decided, you even said you were going to delay it days out or like a week out from the April 1st. You're like, maybe I need to spend more time.
And let me tell you, if I did that, I'd be 100%. Everyone, I've decided to change the core mechanics once again to this slightly different version, which is fresh to me.
It would harm.
Pick up the old version, but the old version was fine. But I also learned that, I added those. I remember when you first played, there was those locked slots. You remember the inventory slots? And I noticed on stream, you were like, oh, I have to. You were
I thought it would be permanent because I looked at the last one. It was like millions of crystals. Like, oh, surely this is like a permanent unlock system. And then I die and I go back in. I'm like, wait, what?
But the main problem was that you were going. Because you're a high energy streamer. You're going, you've got momentum, you're flying through, you got your music, and then this slows like, oh wait, can't pick up, must clear space, and you're like, oh, what do I want to drop? And then you were reading through each one, and the momentum went way down. And
I think there's a place for it, and I think you agree with this too. I think you said you want to bring it back in some form, like I don't know what you're gonna call it, but like the Eclipse modifiers that you have planned for the game, like optional. You opt into this extra difficulty thing. Is that?
Yeah. So I'm adding this ranking system, which is going to basically give you a score per run, and each additional modifier that you apply will give you a better rank. So, you basically will have like Nightmare with all the modifiers active will give you the highest rank if you made it to like Island 100. But this is pretty much impossible because each modifier will be pretty hefty on
Ooh,
its
you hear
own.
that? Ooh, it's
So
impossible.
yeah,
Uh-oh.
yeah, I say that, and there's gonna be a guy in the first day who's like, "Yep, easy work," but very hard, right? Nightmare is already kind of tough. There's gonna be like 20 modifiers probably, right? And one of those will be those lock slots. But the thing is, it's optional. It's not going to drag your like if you just want to have a fun run and you want to just sprint through and not have to worry about managing your inventory, there it is. You can just do it. And I added it back, and I made the mistake of doing that after people were used to the slots being unlocked for a while.
Yeah.
And that made me realize,
Oh
like,
yeah. Once you give them
I can't be
something,
making
you
these
can't
changes.
take it away.
Yeah, it's not unreleased anymore. It's actually out, and people get attached to a certain, how it works. And by making them relocked, there was a lot of people who were pretty angry. So I think it's important now for me to be sure that I'm doing the right thing and I'm not making a mess. And
isn't that funny though? Because AAA, I'm sure, like the mindset across all of the, I don't know if it's like the AAA studio as a whole, but definitely the people making the decisions, they would definitely have been like, no, we're keeping in the lock system because you got to drip feed right. You can't let them have all the weapons and unlocks right away, or not the weapons, but you know what I'm saying? Like you can't have, it's more fun. It's more engaging. And no, it just pads out the playtime unnecessarily. And guess what? That's going to kill people. Kill their engagement, kill their enthusiasm for the game. It's like, what do you mean? It's the same thing with like League of Legends and Earth mode. It's like, yeah, it's way more fun. Not nowadays because they freaking balanced Earth mode for who knows what reason. But when it first came out and people stopped playing League after Earth was done. I'm sorry, I don't know if you know what that is. Basically, so basically the game just is super fast paced, 80% cooldown reduction on all abilities. Like it is so much fun. It was just crazy, wacky stuff. Of course, it was omega unbalanced, but it was so much fun. However, once Earth mode ended for the first time, League of Legends as a whole saw like their normal player base before Earth, it dropped after Earth. And because it was just that much fun, it's like people saw, it's like the forbidden fruit, right? Once they taste it, they don't want to go back. They don't want to go back to the thing. So there's definitely a fine balance you have to make between, I don't want to say intentionally time gating people or like wasting their time. I think that's a huge point that a lot of developers don't really consider a lot is like, is my player having fun right now? Am I wasting their time with something unnecessary? And I'm glad that you have taken that approach with the inventory slots because that was the thing. I was like, why are these locked? Like, what's the point? It doesn't add anything special to each run. So I'm glad that you have that approach. It's like I probably could get away with that.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like respecting players' time is number one. Like I want this game to be jump in, have fun, jump out. There's no downtime. There's no wasted time. But at the same time, like you said, right, everyone loved that mode, the League of Legends mode, and they took it out, and everything feels slow and boring and probably harder and not as fun. But the thing is, maybe the original mode was the right call, and by giving the player the sped up version, they got so used to it that even though they are enjoying it more, it's not the right call for the overall like longevity of the game. So it is tricky because the slots, I know they feel kind of restrictive, but they did make you have to craft a build and not just pick up everything. Because that is one critique I have. A lot of roguelikes where you just pick up everything and that's your build. You're not really going for anything particular. And I like that you were forced into like, okay, if I pick up a fire right here, it doesn't make sense to my build. I'm going to just fall behind. I have to use my space.
Yeah.
But since it's optional in the future, people who like that kind of style can just turn on that modifier and then they have their way. So I think
it's
that's
definitely more interesting because you can then design systems around that. You can add like, the equivalent of a recycler or a scrapper or, whatever it is. Like you can, just because you drop something, doesn't mean it's like just going to turn into crystals. Maybe you can, that's up to you, the developer. You can think of all these cool things and you can't do that with a system where it's just like, yeah, just pick up everything. Who cares?
Yeah, right. Exactly. This is so man. I wish you could see my ideas document because there's just like literally 50 pages of stuff that I'm interested in seeing if it'll work or try it. And that's the beauty of the genre and in general of game development, where you can just kind of have a good core that works and then go off on all these tangents to see what works. Like I'm thinking of a melee weapon, like we were talking last night, where you grapple. You can okay. Here's my idea. You when you press melee, you won't melee normally. You'll swing your melee weapon, but if you press like right click, you'll be able to, or left click, you'll be able to grapple. So you'll be able to pull enemies in and then time your melee. So it'll be this weird new mechanic introduced in a weapon. That's kind of this interesting idea. Maybe it won't be fun, but it's fun to be able to think about these new ways to add content without just, here's the SMG. It's like the AOR, but it's a bit faster.
Maybe make the melee just like break armor immediately. So the tanky guys, you could take a huge risk, but then just obliterate or maybe it deals like insane amount of bonus damage if they have armor, something like that, where it's like high risk, high reward.
There you go. Your mind runs wild with all the possibilities. It's the beauty of the of games, and that's why it's so fun, because you just have this this list of stuff to get through, and it's no longer like daunting. It was very daunting before the game came out to have all these ideas and just not have the time to make them. But now that I know people like the core game, I can kind of relax a bit more and be like, all right, let's see what ideas will be the most fun to explore. And I'm still not there yet. I'm still fixing bugs, but eventually, I'll be trying all these wacky. As you mentioned as well, a lot of the mods are stat ups and kind of boring and kind of they're necessary to have these kind of mods like plus 50% damage, nothing else. But I do want to try more wacky ones that they just take more time to make. Like say, like you break a rock and these ghosts will come out of the rocks and home towards enemies, or someone suggested a really interesting one on Reddit I saw today was a greed perk that gives you loads of money, but this invincible slug is slowly chasing you across every island forever. Like just all these creative ideas, like it's so fun to imagine these things being added. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think I've covered most of the questions that I wanted to ask you specifically with the game and solo development and all that. You have anything to close out here?
No, thanks for playing, and it's been awesome. It's amazing to see you and others play the game and just figure out. It's just 5 years working on one thing, you do get very fed up of it. So just to see it finally come out and be liked at all is a really great feeling. So
yeah, and I'm sure that's
just filled up motivation.
You too, right?
Yeah, exactly. I am so excited every day. I'm waking up just super motivated to just make it better. And the idea is maybe every like 6 months look, there's a Crab Championship update. Let's see what happens. Let's see what's been added, and you get pleasantly surprised by just a few things here and there, and eventually it's gonna feel like a whole different thing. But just a building battle. You just gotta keep adding blocks until it's all there.
Absolutely.